Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Fantasy Fiends podcast that Stevie is not starting and ruining on the first minute. Welcome to the new and updated Fantasy Fiends podcast. I'm just kidding. Stevie's having some internet difficulties, so he's going to join us whenever the internet starts working for him. Today we've got we're going to call him pretty awesome JT Williams joining us. JT and I have a little bit of a friendly rivalry going on about whose assassin is cooler. Obviously mine is, as all of you longtime viewers of the Fantasy Fiends podcast have to know. But welcome, Jeremy. Welcome back. It's been 6 months, a year since the last time you came on?
Yeah, it's been quite a while. Awesome. Team Saviska, by the way.
Yeah, Team Saviska. Boo! Jeremy's assassin is named Sviska, and everybody, of course, knows the hunter is supreme. So Stevie always likes to start out the podcast with talking about something cool that's happened. So, Jeremy, what's something cool that's happened to you in the last week or so?
Last week or so? Man.
Yeah.
I've survived.
You survived. such high standards.
Well, 5 kids, it's always risky. It could be a spill on the floor, sharp object ran at you. I survived.
Well, it's a good thing you're a paramedic, so you can just patch up your own boo-boos.
Are we live?
We are totally live.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. The finally crapped out.
You missed the first error-free introduction to the Fantasy Fiends podcast in history.
I bet it was so boring. We probably lost half our viewers.
There was an error, though. He talked about his assassin being great. I mean, that's an error. Right there.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yes. Okay, so Stevie, tell us something cool that's happened to you in the last week.
Oh, man. I know I said it last week, but I have finally finalized the artist for the new covers for my new series. He's so finalized, he's now doing rough sketches of the first book, and I think that's it, really. Thanksgiving wasn't last week, was it?
Yeah, give or take.
Was it?
I think so, or
something like that.
I don't remember.
It was the week before.
I was actually really sick, but I still got my writing done.
That's good. That's some of my best and weirdest sort of plot twists have kicked in while sick.
It's crazy because I was actually writing about a horrible plague, so I just used all of my symptoms and just tripled them, times them by 10, and it came out, like you said, really weird. It's like you have that flu fever,
Yeah.
So you just write something really strange, but I know I'm going to keep it. Just going to have to clean it up a bit.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I would say that's my good news for the week. Things are going steady. Things are going as planned. It's not as fast as I'd like it to be, but it's definitely, I would say, efficient for my lifestyle right now. I'm very excited. What about who hasn't gone yet?
It's just me that hasn't gone yet.
Okay.
This weekend, last weekend, I got a chance to have sort of a writing retreat. I retreated from writing for a weekend, put my computer down, spent it at a cabin at a frozen lake, about half an hour away from where I live. So it was really nice, close drive, but far enough outside of town that it was just absolute silence. I filmed a video on my phone and posted it to my Andy Peliquin author page in my Facebook group. You can see it's just so beautiful. The lake is frozen over, so you can walk out onto the middle of it, and there's nothing around for miles in every direction. And it was so nice to be there. This is my first time in real snow since leaving Japan. I think the only time I've actually had real snow was, I think it was 12 or 13. And so now, here in Canada, it's supposed to snow all the time, but it's been an unusually warm autumn to winter here in British Columbia. So this was the first time that I got to experience real snow, and it was really nice. But it really gave me an appreciation for just how cold it can be. And in a project that I'm going to be working on mid next year, my characters are going to go through sort of this desolate wasteland of snow. And so I'm sort of capturing that memory so I can write that into my story to make it really accurate, because, the detrimental effects of that extreme cold are something that you don't really think about or realize until you live in that extreme cold.
Did you just say Canada was a desolate wasteland?
There are parts of Canada that are desolate wastelands, yes, sir.
Except for the polar bears.
Yes, Stevie.
The polar bears.
Here in Texas, we have a lot of snow all the time.
Every
Really?
It's
day.
great.
I forgot you're from Texas.
Yeah, just south of you.
So you're Dallas?
Guess keep going south, Houston.
Oh, Houston. So I hope you don't have asthma problems.
No, it's bad though.
Yeah, I actually, when I was a baby, I lived in Houston, and my parents had to move to near Austin because I couldn't breathe. So, and it's like it cleared right up apparently.
It's when my wife and I take the kids to San Antonio, it's the same thing. We go from having allergies constantly to nothing. Everything's
Really?
cleaner, just get from here. Oh yeah.
Do you gain 10
It's we
pounds from the
got more
Mexican
chemical
food?
plants. Yeah, there's that. But we got chemical plants more prominent in the trees around here. So
Mm. That's true.
In
So
Houston, they say Houston, don't they, with no H?
Houston.
No, they do. You say okay. For some reason, I thought I heard them like Houston people talking, and they say Houston without the H sound. So
It's like a very silent H in my opinion. It's like you. I just got back from Houston. Yeah, I say the H just slightly, just slightly. So there was something. Oh, so something really weird about me. And through school, I learned a lot about the cold for some reason. In fact, what my capstone for my business class was, we had to break apart the ascent of Mount Everest and like discover management processes, how the people couldn't have died. It was that really famous excursion up Mount Everest where a lot of people died. And we had to study that and figure out, who were the managers, how could they have managed their teams better. It was really interesting. I learned a lot about freezing to death. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so I actually used that knowledge to write books 1 and 3 of the series because it's in a vast wasteland of ice and snow. So a lot of people die of, frostbite and freezing to death.
The books of the Bizarre Blade.
Yeah.
That's so weird. In my head, I always kind of pictured it as more of a foresty place.
He goes to the jungle, and it's so funny to see him go from the ice to the jungle because he's never seen jungle animals. He's never really seen the jungle trees. He's never been accustomed. He's never had humidity before. And so he talks about his hair, the sweating, which you can sweat in the snow, but it's just a different kind. And
yeah,
I don't know. I kind of just put myself in his place. I didn't want to forget that he's never been in the jungle, and then I wanted to really. I take my time with that kind of stuff, so it's not just like, oh, I'm in the jungle, I'm fine. No, it's completely different, and he gets it. He gets in trouble with some big insects because this is the prehistoric time, so I could add all kinds of crazy critters in there. Without, I don't want to give away too much now, and some created vegetation that I made. So
nice.
Yeah. So today we're talking about adventure, right? Adventure.
Well, actually, I changed the topic just a little bit.
Okay.
We were reading. Jeremy was the one who suggested the topic, and he was talking about sort of the bonds of friendship formed in a battle or an adventure. And we had talked about that before. But then I was thinking, reading the news, listening to any talk show, the radio, whatever, you hear about us versus them in so many different aspects. You've got the Democrats versus the Republicans. You've got the conservatives versus the liberals. You've got the
liberals,
everybody against everybody, and there's so many ways that the world is divided now. But then if you read fantasy novels specifically, I'm sure sci-fi has them too, you read about these people banding together against a common enemy, or for a mission. Like look at the Fellowship of the Ring, right? When it started out, everybody just kind of wanted their own thing. All of the kingdoms wanted the one ring so that they could defeat Sauron and the orcs and all of that. But because they had this common goal of, all right, we need to make it, we got to figure it out, we got to make it work, they banded together and they became the Fellowship of the Ring. And ultimately, there was much more than just companions. They became friends and, all of that. And that was a really interesting thing for me to think about, because in the world right now, there are no real common enemies. There's all this political intrigue. There's the threats to the country, but there's no real enemy. But then, like, for example, in an alien invasion story, all of the nations of the world unite to fight the aliens, or in a fantasy story, you know, when there's always the bigger threat of the monsters or the evil gods, the kingdoms unite. And I kind of find myself wanting something like that as a means of sort of breaking through all of those barriers and uniting us. Obviously, it sounds terrible to say I wish there was some, you know, post-apocalyptic thing to come on the world. But, you know, you ever feel that way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you look back to even like our own history in the Crusades, it's kind of the same thing that happened there. There was so much infighting with Europe. The Pope was like, I'm tired of all these lords and kings and whatnot fighting each other. So let's give y'all a common enemy. Y'all need to get Jerusalem back from the Muslims. And that sparked a war. It united everybody, but it's exactly what you're talking about. It was a horrible thing to happen, but it was used to unite. And it's no different than some of the world wars where, you know, unfortunately, that's brought certain countries together. You know, even there was a lot of division before 9/11 in the United States, and then 9/11 happened, and everybody was on the same page suddenly. And then you fast forward to now, and say the teens coming up, you know, they weren't at school when the towers were hit. Most of them weren't born. You know, I still remember that. I still remember middle school sitting there, and we watched it all day on TV, and it was like, okay, who's responsible? Let's go bomb them. You know, you say that now, and people get offended.
Yeah,
it's a completely different world now, where it's like, well, you know, we never should have went to war. It's like, well, you weren't even alive when this was going on. You don't, you know, and it's not the same as pointing and going, Nazi Germany is the bad guy or Japan is the bad guy. It's a lot more complicated because the bad guy is not wearing bad guy clothes. You know, the bad guy is kind of everywhere in every little part of every country to some degree, and you can't defeat an enemy like that so easily.
So do you say that in fantasy books that we are simplifying the villain and actually giving him that target?
I think that's one thing we need to watch out for in fantasy books is simplifying it. You know, I like a book to have multiple layers. You know, in one of my own that we discussed on the last podcast, here comes the orc army and they're horrible and everybody's uniting to go against them. But then once you get a little further into the story, you figure out the guy who resurrected the orcs and is leading them doesn't want to fight the elves. He's like, no, listen, there's a greater enemy out there. We've got to unite. And those old prejudices came back up. And so the elves and the orcs end up fighting. And the end result is this enemy that the leader of the orcs was talking about comes and annihilates almost all the elven kingdoms.
Do you play World of Warcraft?
No.
Okay.
I've played. It took too much time away. The little bit I did play of it.
I am lucky enough to not be. I mean, I love the game, but I always get my work done first, and I never have time to play it. But I am a fan actually for the Alliance. But you
Horde.
Actually, of course you're Horde. Of course you are. Everybody who I know is Horde. Andy would probably be Horde. So I just have a golden heart, all right? But there is a part where a human and an orc, so not an elf, but a human and orc, they actually are smart enough to realize that they need to unite to fight a common enemy. So that's why I was wondering if you played World of Warcraft.
No, I'm familiar with like the original Warcraft games, like Warcraft 2 and 3. I like those, and I played WoW just a little bit, but it's just such. I played RuneScape back in the day.
RuneScape? Oh God.
And then Guild Wars. Yeah, exactly. Guild Wars was what I did.
Yeah.
But World of Warcraft I just didn't have time. By the time I got to it, I had my first kid, and it was just like, okay, work and everything else is a little more important than sitting here playing WoW, unfortunately. It's a fun game.
That reminds me, I do have something cool for the week. And this is going to blow y'all away. So No, it's better than that. No, I'm kidding. I actually just signed, Stevie Collier just signed a contract with Netflix.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
I sure did. And I get all the movies I want. I get all the TV shows I want. And I can stream them right to my home. It's
basically
great.
what Stevie means is that he signed up for Netflix. But
Did I get y'all?
Just playing with us. You know, there was plenty of incredulity, but you know, I love you, so I'm gonna give you a chance to be honest. But you know, if that's how you want to play it, that's cool too.
Do y'all like that?
Yeah,
that was good.
My mom actually made that joke to me, and I fell for it so hard. saying that I got like Netflix contacted me or something, and she played it so well. I was so mad that I fell for a mom joke.
That's
but
awesome.
I was like, I'm using it on the podcast. Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
I just
when Jeremy, when you were talking about the Crusades, that sort of that got me thinking about the Hero of Darkness series. So the Hero of Darkness series ends at a very specific point where sort of the religions of the world are sort of the truth about the origins of these religions comes out. And now from where the book ends, from where the series that I've written ends to the end of the story or where I want to end it, there is a lot of that kind of thing. You know, there's going to be a lot of people who are divided by it because maybe some people, they don't like the religion, so hearing that it's not exactly the way they thought, they'll be happy. Or the people who are angry at religious people who are taking control, whereas others who are staunchly religious or who are religious themselves are using their religion to gain power, there's going to be this division. And so the hunter is going to be kind of caught in the middle of it, and he's not going to care about the religion one way or another. He's got this enemy that he's fighting, you know, this big bad essentially, and he's caught in the middle. So he's going to sort of be drawn in both directions. He's going to have to defend himself. And so it really got me in mind of sort of a crusade against the hunter who's causing this fraction in this fracture in the world. And it's such an interesting thing to think about. It's such a big story. I don't know if I'm going to be able to write it in, you know, less than 5 or 6 books, because that sort of repercussion would be huge. But it's such an interesting thing to think about in the context of the stories that I've created, you know, putting all of the things that I see around me, you know, the very visible divides into the context of a fantasy story. And I think that's what makes fantasy so great, is that you can find clever ways to play real life into the stories and sort of give people hold the mirror up to people and say, all right, this is what you look like. Sure, you're not a half demon assassin, or you're not a fat priest, you're not this, but this is what you look like when you act like this, or when you talk like this, or when you do things. And so it really does make for much deeper stories than just, you know, swing a sword, kill a bad guy.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff is not always intentional. You know, you don't set off to write a story with a separate social aspect to it. It just kind of comes out, especially like I was talking about with the orcs and the elves. You know, that kind of filters into kind of what we're dealing with now in the United States, which is a lot of fear-based rulings and let's do this because we're worried about this. That is, if you follow any of my stuff, after all these elves are killed and essentially the peoples of magic come under attack, they are the ruling powers, the Grand Protectorate, tells all the people, you need to be fearful of these creatures of magic. They have a horrible disease that's going to infect you, and you need to report them. And it becomes kind of a thing where, kind of similar to Nazi Germany, where anyone that didn't line up with the Aryan population or what the Nazi party agreed with was basically drawn out and killed. And that's essentially what I do in the later stages of my book. You know, we talk about rogues of magic and Saviska and all that. That is kind of the plot that's set up in those books, is that Saviska comes from a background where he believes all these creatures are evil. You know, that magic is evil, magic's an evil entity. And, you know, people have asked me for books post Rogues of Magic. Well, I'm kind of setting all that up because, like you said, you know, it's hard to do it in just a few books. When you're showing one side of the world, a few characters and their struggle, then you go on to the greater problems. You know, what's really going on behind the scenes. It's not something, you know, like you were talking about. It's you kind of hold up a mirror to society and you show them kind of different views of the same thing, and it doesn't look so nice. Or maybe they, you know, you kind of hope that they'll read it and they'll be like, well, wait a minute, this is kind of similar to this. This kind of makes sense.
Yeah, very interesting. And I like you said, it does really come through subconsciously. I was in writing the book 4 of my Heirs of Destiny series. There's this riot and the people are rising up. And as I was writing sort of the climactic scene, there was this whole discussion that it kind of ended up being my thoughts on the Second Amendment and people's right to bear arms and sort of that whole debate about that. And it was interesting because it just came out through the story, but it wasn't that I was consciously thinking about that. It was just this almost a throwaway line or this quote or this thing that the person said that really was like, okay, so that's where it comes from.
So with so earlier I think I wanted to talk about something that you brought up, but my internet connection crapped out. You said that, you know, as today we don't really have a common enemy, and then and then we got into the topic of that we don't, you know, they don't have like the evil warlock dressing and stuff like that to be targeted. I guess, you know, when you said that, it made me think, you know, is America's common enemy that we don't even know yet? It's intangible, like obesity, cancer, and stuff like that. Is that our common enemy that we should unite for? I know it doesn't have anything to do with fantasy, but it was something that popped into my head when you brought that up. Do we have a common enemy that we don't even know about yet, or we're not taking as seriously as we should?
You know, I feel like in many ways the common enemy is itself. You know, like there are so many people fighting over so many different things. And so if people could stop looking for things to fight about and unite behind something, unite behind one good cause, one great cause, in many ways I think that would, number one, solve the issue, and two, reduce a lot of the division. And it's impossible to say, you know, okay, one side of the debate is better than the other. But if we stop looking at it, all right, my side versus your side, and we start saying, all right, how do we solve this very large problem? Then it could avoid a lot of the division. You know, you hear about people who reach across the aisle. You know, they're people who are just like super standouts. You know, the politicians, the congressmen who reach across the aisle and get, you know, the Democrats, the Republicans, you know, the opposite side involved. If everybody did that, if everybody tried to reach across the aisle and say, okay, your side has merit, my side has merit, let's take the best of both, marry them, and put that forward, that would solve so many issues. But because everyone's my way versus your way, it's just making things worse. The divide is bigger than ever.
Yeah, I mean that's the wonderful thing. If we could all kind of see it from the same point of view, or at least try to. But you know, now it's not like, say, the 1940s when people got their news from the movie theater and it was everybody saw the same thing. It's you can go into any broadcasting station, you can get some very different view. You know, Fox News is going to report something a lot different than, say, Mother Earth News. It's completely different, and people can focus in and hone into the pages and like those pages on Facebook and only see that information. You know, someone up in, for example, upstate New York, up on the border, you know, near Canada, might have an opinion about, say, the border stuff going down in the Southwest here. My opinion, living here and seeing the, you know, what I would describe as the truth, is a lot different because I've dealt with it personally. There's a lot of great people that are here illegally, and that's fine. But then there's people that aren't so great, and unfortunately, the law kind of falls into all this, you know. And a lot of times, I think I would assume that our greatest issue is this fear-based defense. Oh, I'm offended at this. I don't like this. That is what's causing a lot of division, and people don't want to hear. Both sides of the same problem don't want to hear about one truth. It's weird. It's weird what we're dealing with now, and unfortunately, I don't see a real easy way out of it. I think that's trying to like determine world peace. There's not going to be world peace ever, and that's just human nature. That's one thing we all write about, you know.
Yeah.
You think? Go ahead.
Only bad because of one point of view. You know, from his point of view, he's doing the right thing. And we kind of get extreme with that in fantasy fiction with the sense of, oh, well, they're going to cover the world in darkness. Well, that's kind of obscure to me. Why does he want darkness? What is the darkness? And that's what I think, especially nowadays, we're trying to do more of, is trying to give a more real reason to, quote unquote, evil.
You know, but I think in many ways that's what makes these things in fantasy so popular, such a popular trope. You know, it's what people love about fantasy. You know, when they finally see all of the enemies unite to take on the bad guy. As a perfect example, David Weber's Safehold series. Safehold is this complex political story. It is amazing, and it's big. I think it's 9 huge books. But at the beginning, it's this little island kingdom by themselves. And over the course of the series, more and more people join them for different reasons, or, you know, however it works out. But every time a new kingdom joins against the common enemy, there's this sense of satisfaction, like, yes, you're happy for it. And so when we read fantasy novels or science fiction, you know, and we feel we see these people joining together to band against a common enemy. It brings us that sense of satisfaction. Like, it holds up. Yes, the world could be like this. You know, it makes us feel better about humanity in general, even though our world right now is so divided and so fractious. There's hope, because if these random people in a fantasy novel can do it, we can too. And that hopefulness is really what makes these stories resonate so well with people.
If the author can do a good job of that, that is probably one of my favorite tropes. That's what gives me chills. That's what gives me goosebumps when, you know, four nations that hated each other come together to fight orcs coming out of the ground. And you're just like, yes, and it's the final 60 pages of the book, and you've got goosebumps. And it kind of reminds me of, oh my God, what is that movie with Will Smith? And it's Armageddon.
Yep.
It's Armageddon?
No. Independence Day.
Independence Day. That speech by the president, like, I just love it so much when they're all uniting together to fight that the aliens. I think it's a famous speech now, isn't it? Like, I think a lot of people. But anyway, yeah, I really like that trope.
Or go with Lord of the Rings. That's the Aragorn speech right before they go and fight at the Black Gate. You know, that speech is super inspiring. Or Braveheart's speech, you know, the super popular speech in his movie. These are the moments that people really remember and that give you that emotional impact, because it's something we all want. We all want to think that we as humans could rally behind a common cause, and seeing that characters, like you said, Stevie, four nations that hated each other or that had nothing in common and no reason to join, throughout the course of the story, you know, through everything that happens, they join together. There is that sense of hopefulness. And that I believe is probably the number one takeaway from any great book, is this sense of hopefulness that things will ultimately be better, or there's the possibility that things can be better, no matter how fucked up our world is, no matter how fucked up we as human beings are. As long as the story ends on a hopeful note, it leaves us feeling hopeful for our own situations. And I think that's what makes the best books the best.
Do you think this happens? Like, I haven't really thought about this until we brought it up. So do you think it's a subconscious satisfaction when we read something like that?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
All of these emotional notes, they're all underneath. They're all unconscious and subconscious, but they're the things that ultimately make you feel best about the story. Like, as an example, Bloody Rose. For those of you who haven't read Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose, they're two similar books that are vastly different in many ways. The ending note of Kings of the Wild was very different than the ending note of Bloody Rose. And so it took me a lot longer to get into Bloody Rose. And I think overall I enjoyed the book less than I enjoyed the first book. But when I walked away at the end of the story, it had finished on this ringing note of hopefulness that no matter how many of the main characters died, no matter how much darkness there was, no matter how much garbage the world ended up with, there was some hopefulness to it. Even for one or two of the minor characters, the characters who weren't, you know, who weren't super important, there was that note. And it made me feel ultimately better walking away from the story than I did walking away from Kings of the Wild, even though I enjoyed the first one overall much more.
Then there are two ways you can go off of that. What if nobody listens to the protagonist and then he's left alone to handle the enemy that should have been the common enemy? So you have half of the book him trying to warn people, and then they close the gate on him, and boom, there's this huge dragon that he's got to go against. Or at the last minute, they see that, okay, he was right the whole time, and then they rush up behind him. I think that could be a really good goosebump-inducing moment right there when they finally get it, and a lot of them die because they didn't listen in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, playing off your first one, if the hero battles this dragon alone, he's almost certainly going to die, right? Or he's going to suffer, he's going to be wounded, maybe permanently. So
there will be losses.
Exactly. But that sense of self-sacrifice in a way is its own sort of hopefulness, because there is this sort of good in people. You know, you're showing this guy who maybe started out not a dragon slayer, but ended up a dragon slayer, for the right reasons, no matter what people did or didn't do, no matter how many people ignored him, he still made that sacrifice. There is that hopefulness that there are good people, there are heroes in the world that can take these actions.
So did JT with Saviska, I'm saying that right? Saviska?
Yeah.
So what happens with Saviska? So he's an assassin, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like he'd be the kind of guy going and saying, "Oh, there's this common enemy," or did he change to that?
He has the kind of the cliche. He was the orphan. The thing was about him being an orphan is his entire history was hidden from him. He was one of many that were chosen to be of this assassin group because honestly, if you compare this group of assassins to earlier in my other stories, they're kind of sucky. Like they're a copy of another group of assassins that basically the Grand Protectorate was like, oh, these guys look cool. We should try to make guys like this. And at this point in the world, when Saviska's alive, most of the high elves and dwarves and stuff like that, they're gone. They've been killed either in war or by essentially a disease that only affects creatures of magic. So with Saviska, he starts off kind of listening to what, he was doing what he was supposed to do, killing these different people, but then him and several other assassins started kind of piecing together going, well, wait a minute, why are we killing these people? Unlike the hunter who has a bloodthirsty weapon, Saviska was sent on essentially missions, and he, on the way the one book starts, he goes on a mission, he finds he's supposed to kill a child, and he's really, at this point, already wondering, why am I here? What did this child do that's a threat to my government? This, if it would have been her dad, for example, it makes sense. He was the king. But why was he going after this kid? And that little bit of delay causes the defense of the castle just enough time to get there and stop him, and he ends up running for his life. Well, he ends up getting sent kind of abruptly to a far northern place, and essentially he's told, don't take any weapons, don't do this, don't do that. And it's just an extremely strange setting for him. And he's basically told, go there, and we'll provide for you in time. And it's kind of, the first book's kind of a mystery because he learns that not everyone of magic is dead. That essentially there was a city up in the far mountains to where no one could, they didn't know magic was hiding. They discover magic's there, and it kind of ties into his lineage. And little by little, he goes into the city and determines that he had reason for questioning everything going on because of an inner tie with the entire way the world was going. Basically, the Dwemhar, which is kind of the world I have, this race of ascended beings, they were slowly coming back into the world, and he was of this race. And essentially, without him knowing and others like him knowing, they were awakening to this greater truth, even if they weren't aware of it. And he just happens to show up at the time when these last peoples of magic are about to rebel and try to survive in the world.
I forgot my question that I was going to ask about it, but I didn't know a lot about.
He's better than Andy's character. He is better than Andy's character.
Yeah,
if you were going to ask about that,
that's
I think that all of the joking aside, the Hunter is really a hopeful character. Like this sounds ridiculous. Anybody who's read Darkblade Assassin only, it's dark, right?
Yeah, to me, I'm just like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. But then over the course of the book, the series, the 6 books, especially the first 6, there's this evolution to him that by the end of the series, he's very much the same person he was in many ways, but there's a note of hopefulness to him. Like the character who said all men deserve to die at the beginning of the series ultimately says glass may shatter and steel may break, but no man is beyond repair. Right. So that's he's still a killer. He's still got this, his demon side, but there's this sense of hopefulness to him that you would never have seen in the original Hunter. 6 books later, all the shit he goes through, all the people he interacts with, all the things that he has to deal with, it changes him. And though it's a dark series, there is this ringing note of hopefulness that, number one, he's not alone in his fight, not the fight to save the world or to stop the bad guys, but his own fight with his inner demons. you know, that no matter who you are, no matter what you've got going on or what you're wrestling with, you're not alone. There's someone there that will be there, that can help you, you know. And that for me, I didn't write the series intending it to end on that hopeful note, but it really came out. And I walked away from writing that last scene, the epilogue, after, you know, the hunter saves the day, essentially. That epilogue scene, it put a smile on my face, because no matter what the hunter had to go through, it got him somewhere. It got him people. It got him a purpose. It got him to a place where he had more hope in his life than at the beginning, where he was a loner and he had no hope of ever having anyone or anything in his life beyond killing. And so, you know, like, that's something that people who don't read to the end of the series, they don't get that ringing note. But I feel like that's what I want all of my series ultimately to convey, that there is an element of hopefulness, that no matter how shitty things look now, things do get better one way or another, even if it's just in a little way for you know, for me or for you or for the people, instead of, you know, the country is fixed or all the problems or world peace or hunger is no more. It may never be ended on a macro scale, but on a micro scale, there is a sense of hopefulness. And that's what I want readers to take away from my stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting with Saviska, is that he gets to that, you know, the end of the little trilogy with him in it, and he you know, he doesn't want to be a part of, I guess you would call it, the new world. He essentially wants to, for lack of flowery language, run off with his elven girlfriend.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what they do near the, you know, spoiler alert, at the end of that story, is they're going to kind of go on and do their own thing. Meanwhile, the other companion characters, you know, they're there and they're rebuilding the world. And, you know, a year or two from now, when I have another full series out, and you put Rogues of Magic in between all my other books, Saviska in that series is kind of a lot more passive. You know, if you compare Saviska to Keelan, for example, Keelan's extremely aggressive in everything he does, and that's what that series is about. You know, we talk about dark books. You know, book 1 starts with multiple main characters dying. Book 2 is not much better. Book 3, I kill 18 of 23 named characters.
God.
Book 4, I mean,
Crazy.
just that same theme. Book 5, we're killing entire cities, and everything he's worked for falls apart even more. And it's not till book 6 where he basically figures out that Death, who he considered his enemy, has never been his enemy the entire time, that there were events that were outside of his control, that it didn't matter what he did, he wasn't going to fix. But in doing all that, he made friends, he made a difference, and it does end on that high note, which again was surprising for me writing it, because I knew his story. I knew it from Rogues of Magic because he's a character there. I kind of knew where it was going, but I didn't know to what degree. And continuing to write it now, again, it's something that you can't just convey over a few books, but when you look back at an entire series, it's like, you know, if someone doesn't get all the way through, like, oh, well, this is all just depressing. Well, it really isn't. Not if you go all the way through the series. That's kind of the point of a series.
Yeah, I think, wow, I feel like I've learned a lot more about Saviska, actually, and the Hunter, which I didn't know there was any more to learn. I didn't know he actually became a good guy.
Well, that's definitely not the case. He doesn't.
I know.
He doesn't become a good guy, but that was that ringing note of hope is the thing that I wanted him to feel, and because it made me feel good about the story. You know, no matter how dark I started it, no matter how dark I took it, as long as it ended with that hope, it made me feel like there's hope for, you know, whatever I'm wrestling with in my life or whatever is going on around me.
For Esh, it was on a macro scale, the things that he fixes. First it's on micro, and then it goes to macro in the last book. But I know this isn't about assassins. I was just curious about Saviska, and now I actually know a lot more about the Hunter, which is cool. In fact, there's a question I had about the Hunter, and that, well, isn't the Hunter going to forget everything now? You know, because it restarts for him.
No, so that's actually not the case. He gets his memory wiped. Like, priests actually come and wipe his memory every 50 to 100 years. They track him down. That's a major plot element in book 3. Spoiler alert. But this time he defeated them, so he hasn't had his memory erased yet. They may still continue to hunt him down in the future books, but at least where he's at now, he has his memory back. So that's, there was, if he'd had his memory erased, there could have been a different note, sort of someone starting anew. But I didn't want to go that way. So,
well, should we? Any final notes on before we get to the reading, Andy?
No, I think I've probably said a little more than I should have in this podcast. I kind of monopolized it.
You need to. This podcast is mostly me. I'm the face. I'm everything. All the chicks come to look at me. I mean, I don't think we have any female viewers besides my. Oh God, I'm in trouble. Actually, we've been having people talk for the first time in our chat. Is there anything from? I'm horrible at looking at chat. And Andy, anything we should highlight from chat?
No, D.W. Hawkins is just trolling in a very amusing way.
Stevie's too pretty. Oh, okay. Stevie's too pretty. The funny story real quick about Stevie's too pretty. I was with my girlfriend in Half Price Books, and I got a little heated. I shouldn't have got heated. I didn't mean to, but I was walking through the fantasy section, and there were these two guys, obviously really high, and he touched me, and I don't like being touched. I know it's weird. I'm a happy, positive guy, but I don't like being touched, especially my hair. Don't touch my hair. And he touched my shoulder, and I turned around, and I heard something about pretty, and I thought he was talking to my girlfriend. So already I'm mad, right? And he was talking to me, and he goes, I think he said, "Aren't you pretty?" Oh, I forgot what I said, but it wasn't nice, and I didn't mean to be rude. But yeah, you're right, DW. I am pretty, all right? That hair, though, it's beautiful. Should Andy be the... All right. Sorry. Funny story aside. I get into a lot of fights in Half Price Books.
Are you wearing your armor when that happens or no?
I always wear a cup no matter what, 24/7. Triple extra large and a lot of breathing room in there. I mean, no breathing room in there, excuse me.
All right, well, let's get to the reading. Jeremy, tell us what to do. What parts should we read?
I gotta actually find it in my book, but I'm doing Yvern. He's a shadow elf. He's probably my favorite character. We're gonna have let's see here. What does that sound?
Are there dwarves? Because I can do the Scottish accent for all the dwarves.
There are dwarves.
Good.
Most of them are dead, but there are dwarves. It's good.
Which ones are the dwarves? What names?
They're unnamed because they're the bad guys.
Okay.
And then we'll have Stevie do any female parts.
Always.
You do it so well, Stevie.
I am vegetarian.
Let's see here. Let me pull mine up because let's see here. I sent it to you.
So I just do all the female parts.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that bad.
I told you the extra large cup I wear. How do you expect me to get my voice that high?
Well, it's all that talk about your hair.
Well, this isn't the only place where there's a lot of hair. It's also on my ass. All right.
Well done, Stevie. Way to ruin a great podcast.
I love how it was a really serious podcast. I think we had a lot of good subjects, so we had to tone it down a little bit. I mean, if you're interested in reading the Bizarre Blade series, don't worry. I think every book has a few good penis jokes inside of it. Don't worry. And in book 2, there's a poop joke. Actually, a whole chapter on a sewer. It's wonderful. It's a work of art. It's my form of poetry, as I call poopetry.
I promise that I won't let that scene factor into my review of your book, Stevie.
Just skip over chapter 13.
Chapters 13, 16, and 25.
Just skip the whole book, all right? Are we just waiting?
Jeremy, yeah, we're just waiting for Jeremy.
Oh, he's got the... Wait.
This is a real book.
Oh, a real book.
Ooh.
A real book. That just looks like things I'd kindle my fire with.
You say Kindle my fire when we're talking about Kindle books and paperback books. This is getting kind of fun.
I love the word Kindle. Okay. Andy, stop talking.
So I'm the dwarves.
Yes. You can say that first line there, that first bit of dialogue.
All right. Who's going to narrate?
Fine, I'll do that.
All right.
All right, so I'm all girl voices, right?
Yeah, and if we get, let's see, I'm trying to see what the first one is. So the character Bray, Braei, that would be you, Stevie. I wrote that character for you.
Okay, Bray, and that's a girl.
Yeah.
Okay, did you want me to do the narration, or do you want to? I don't mind.
You can do it if you'd like.
Okay. All right. So, any backstory real quick to this scene, or no?
So you've got the main characters are trying to acquire a poison to heal their captain, and they basically just witnessed a cultish leader of the dwarves sacrifice a bunch of elves to a basically a demigod, and they are collecting the poison. And the shadow elf and the main character and Bray, the female, are attempting to basically steal this poison.
Awesome. Am I still there? Okay. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
All right. 1, 2, 3, and action. All of the dwarves who had been standing were now dying on the floor.
Praise be to Viarica. Dear Viarica, I now take some of your essences.
Avern took out several glass bottles and sampled the glowing substance from the statue.
This is all that is needed. Enough for the need you have, Valrin Stormborn.
Valrin rubbed his blade against his boot and sheathed his blade. Avern handed him one of the vials. He held it up, looking at the strange fluid.
Now we can return.
He said to Bray with a smile.
We have what we need. Do you have what you need?
A voice grumbled from their side. Bray pulled Valrin back as Evern flipped his staff towards the mound of dwarves. The one called Irico stood up. His eyes glowed red.
You cannot throw down a servant of the shrouds with mere earth magic. I am of death. I command the earth to split and pour forth those to serve me as needed. Dwarves are more than mere iron hot metals.
Irico lifted his staff towards Evern.
Elven waste, you cannot kill what is dead.
Irico threw back his hood in an arcane wind of purple magic that enveloped him.
It is a leech, Evern cried. Stormborn, flee from this place. Flee now.
Bray grabbed Valrin. Now, we must go. Was that me?
Yes.
That was you. We're good.
Cool. A blast of green magic struck Avern, and he cowered under a growing ward of gold he used to push back at the Lich's attack. The Lich shouted,
None will escape. None will leave this rock.
A shrill scream pierced the air as Valrin turned to run with Bray. He felt horrible leaving Avern, but the elf was the only one who stood a chance against the power of the Lich. As they climbed up the stairwell, they jumped the steps before pushing open the black doors. There was a loud horn call that bellowed through the ruins. They know we're here!
They know we're here. We must get to the sea.
Sprinting through the hall of the dead spider creatures, they came to the stairwell, and Valrin remembered the outside path. As they reached the top of the stairwell, they took to the open air path and made their way down the side of the mountain to the platform. The water was below them, but they would have to follow the ruins to get lower. Dwarves were behind them. They could hear their gruff voices and the shuffling of their heavy boots. Bray hugged the wall, and Valrin hid behind the crumbling ruins just a few paces from the opening that led toward the stairwell to the black. Several dwarves stopped at the stairwell.
The Master Irico shouted, He must be in trouble.
One said,
I'm not going into that place, no matter the pay, and you can tell the Bard King that yourself.
Another said. A larger dwarf arrived with several other dwarves behind him.
Get down there now, or I will give you to the leech to do what he wishes.
Without further debate, the dwarves began to move down, and the large one stopped at the opening and peered out. Valrin was well hidden, lying on his stomach and looking through a crack in the rock. He was impossible to see. The other dwarves descended, but this other one stepped outside. Though Valrin was well hidden, Bray was much more visible. She clung frozen along the wall and attempted to make herself as flat as possible. The dwarf stepped towards the ruins where Valrin hid. He sniffed the air.
Damn dark magic,
he said to himself. The dwarf spat just near Valrin and then turned to walk when he paused. He was looking towards Bray. Valrin looked up and she stared directly at the dwarf. He wasn't sure if the old dwarf's vision was bad or if he was pausing to make his findings shudder in fear before he announced himself. He unslung a large hammer and stepped forward.
Come, you little rat. You've been messing where you shouldn't.
Valrin noticed now that Bray had tried to move further away from the dwarf, and now her hands were holding her on the rocks she clung to.
No weapon, even,
the dwarf said. Valrin had to do something, but he doubted his skill. He had fought a dwarf once, but this one was much more well-armored, beyond that of the mere sea pirate he had fought before. The dwarf smashed his axe into the side of the ruins. The rocks forced Bray to jump further up. She had no leverage to get back to the platform and possibly attack the dwarf, and there was nowhere for her to run. The dwarf was at the edge.
Come on, little lady. I'm not much into weaker species, but you'd fetch me a bit at the gambling hall back home.
Valrin gripped his sword. His hands were sweating, and he struggled to control his breathing. In a quick jump, he pushed up and ran for the dwarf, thrusting his blade into his back. It didn't pierce the armor, and the tip got stuck before he jerked it back. The dwarf stumbled as he turned. With a yell, he stomped forward, swinging at him. Valrin jumped back, the head of the hammer just missing him. He had to choose fast. Either run further back or attack his adversary. He had to do it, and as the dwarf recovered from his swing, Valrin moved quickly forward, slashing the dwarf's hand and piercing the dwarf's unguarded hand. He then pushed on again, further taking advantage of his opponent and shoving the dwarf with his shoulder. The dwarf fell backward, hobbling on the edge of the precipice for a moment. Valrin steadied his footing as he grabbed the edge of the ruins to keep himself from falling. In a moment of unexpected shock, he watched as the dwarf tumbled down the rocky ruins into the depths of the sea below. Bray had already begun to climb back over, and now managed to climb to a better spot and jump down to Valrin. That was amazing. You did better than I hoped. I'm sorry. I tried to get up above him, and well, I didn't do it. You saved me. He took a moment to think about what had happened. It was the first time he had actually done it. He looked down over the edge again. He had killed that dwarf to save his friend. It felt strange to him, and he still didn't believe he had actually done it. Valrin nodded at her and twirled his sword.
Let's go and get away from this place.
Bray looked back toward the opening and saw no other dwarves. Further away, they could see large torches coming alight along the battlements. She went to the opposite edge where the earlier event had unfolded and pointed. There's a ledge, and it looks to be another stairwell. We may have to jump, but we can get to the sea.
Once we get there, we can't swim to them without the stones that Devern gave us, and their magic is gone. How are we going to signal them to get to us?
We can do it. Just watch. You know, I can figure out something. She gave him a quick grin. They climbed down a section of rock to a barely visible ledge that ran toward the platform that Bray pointed out before. Once on the platform, she looked above them and scanned the area. Okay, the rocks we were hiding behind before were that way. She summoned a large flame between her hands. I just hope they're there and watching. She sent a blast of fire at an angle across the ocean. It began to trace upward and then exploded into a bright orange flash. Now we go downstairs. The dwarves are so dense, they'll take time to figure out what that was, and by then, he will be gone. They went down the stairwell and went to another long pathway. This one seemed to be straight and run directly out and away from the island. Hopefully it would work to get them lower to the water. There were rocky arches overhead, and at least twice Valrin thought he spotted movement above them. As they came to an open area where the water was just below, they found themselves very close to the wooden battlements that were blocking the original entrance when they came in. Bray looked out from them and saw a shadow moving across the water. That is them. They are coming, she said. It was as perfect as they could get to. The area had deep water and an open spot where the ship would come in fairly close. We will need to go to them. They can only come so close to the walls, Bray told him. Valrin scanned the battlements above him. There were a few lone dwarves on watch, but he guessed many of them had gone to the Lich. He thought of Evern. He had liked the elf. Though he was a bit strange, he had a passion for his work. Varn reached and touched the vial of poison. This was the only hope they had for Endanos. They just had to get back to the island.
That's awesome, man. Great job.
Yes.
Very interesting scene.
Yeah, sorry, it's getting a little close to the ending.
I hope we spoiled some details nicely for people who are going to go read the book.
You know, I really like Valren. I'd like to get to know him better.
Yeah, he is the central character in my Stormborn books, which, funny enough, Valren's fate was pretty well known to the people that I originally wrote this book for. It was one of those things where I was like, I can tell you more of Saviska's backstory, or I can tell you more of Valren's. And this was book 2 of what was just going to be 3, and now I'm up to, I have 12 planned. In the next week, I'll be releasing Eklo, which is Stormborn book 6. And then we're going to go into a whole new storyline with Valren. And basically what you see is Valren go from being the little orphan boy who doesn't know hardly anything in Stormborn Book 1 to being the sea captain of an advanced vessel that has everything from crystal technology to the ability to fly. So it's actually more of a story for the readers. It was something they voted for and wanted, so I started writing it, and it kind of went from there.
That's awesome that you have a following that's verbal about what they want. And also, I wanted to say we talked a lot about Saviska, but I feel just from that little bit of reading of Valren, I feel like I connect with him a little bit better. I need to get more. Are your books on Audible, by the way?
No, actually, the only book I have on Audible is Half-Blood's Rising, which is of the Half-Elf Chronicles. Sometime in early next year, Rose of Magic will be being produced by Podium, and is going to be narrated by Tim Gerard Reynolds, and that will be available early 2019.
Nice. You just connected with Podium?
Yes, yeah, and the narrator is going to be, like I said, Tim Gerard Reynolds, so it'll be a good narrator. Well, but we'll see what goes from that to what I do with the other ones.
Wow, that's excellent. And so, as we end this podcast, it felt like it went really quickly. It was I feel like this was one of our more serious podcasts. I feel like Andy had a lot to say about the topic.
I always have a lot to say about everything.
I
try to modulate myself a little.
Actually, before we end the podcast, I was telling my mom for the first time that you have Asperger's. And after I got done laughing because I said the word ass, she was like, "Oh my God, that's why he's so smart." and see, my mom's a doctor, so she like gave this whole spiel about Asperger's. Like, I know, Andy's told me, but she nailed you, and she was like, is he like this or is he like this? Because there's 2 types of like people can be different types of Asperger's with their personalities. Mm-hmm. So it was cool, and now I know a little bit more about you, Andy.
Good.
Yes,
that's good. It's good that you understand me a bit better.
Yes. Yeah.
It'll make this relationship work.
I thought kissing on. Never mind. Whoa. Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. See, I've got a filter. All right. So, guys, I want to. You know what? Real quick, JT, where can people find your books, and where can they find you and connect with you?
Easiest way to get in contact with me is obviously Facebook. I've got a page there. I have a group, The Ascended Realm. Anytime you want to email me, that's fine. authorjtwilliams@gmail.com. And then my website's authorjtwilliams.com. So it's all pretty simple. All my stuff's on Amazon and in Kindle Unlimited. So if you're one of those subscribers, you can literally grab everything.
Awesome, man. And before anyone logs off, I do have news, and so does Andy. We will be doing a giveaway for all of our subscribers. You'll have a chance to win something. Right now, we know it is our books that we're giving away, but the details of the giveaway will be out shortly. We just need to nail them all down. Right, Andy?
Yeah, we'll be announcing how the giveaway is going to work next Tuesday with our podcast. We have to do another time, special time podcast because of my birthday last week. We couldn't do it. So we'll have an announcement on Tuesday how the whole giveaway thing is going to work. It's going to be awesome.
You get some of Andy's gray pubic hair. That's what you get.
You're weird, Stevie.
That's why my books sell, because I'm weird. I don't know, that's why they don't sell. Anyway, yeah, so we are giving away a lot of cool stuff, guys. And everyone, thank you so much for helping this channel grow. If you are listening or viewing, please help us out by hitting that subscribe button and also that like button. It helps us out tremendously to get spread across YouTube. You guys are doing an excellent job of that, as well as the bell notification if you want to be notified when we are live and you can talk with us, which I'm going to try and do a better job of. Anyways, JT, anything else?
That's it for me.
All right, guys, we love you all so much. Go out there and look at some awesome Christmas lights. Enjoy the holidays. We love you all. We hope you have a great night.
See you on Tuesday.